Hi, everyone, and welcome. We are very excited to be joined today by Todd Harrison. Thanks so much for jumping on, Todd. Really appreciate it. We're going to be covering all things cannabis, of course. And as always, if you guys have any questions, comments, jokes, anything anything at all, feel free.
Cheers.
Yeah, that too as well. We take it all. Feel free to throw it in the chat. We take it on every platform except for Instagram. Instagram is our one holdout. But if you're on Instagram, thanks for joining. Appreciate it as well. Um, all right. Well, before we jump into kind of the bigger scene, I feel like we're a month out from 420. We're at 320 today. How are you feeling so far? And do you have plans to celebrate on 420?
Well, 420 takes on a different appreciation as a cannabis professional as it did as a cannabis consumer, right? Because we're hoping that our lawmakers will be, I don't even know what the word is anymore, but this is an active period for the types of things that we're looking for, hoping to see. So to the extent that we think it's going to be an active April into April, it's exciting. But as we've seen, and I would say it's a double-edged sword, but it's actually more like a single-edged guillotine in terms of setting expectations and having hope on a certain date. And then when that date passes and everyone's like, oh, it's not going to happen. But, there is speculation heading into this Friday. That's Don Murphy talking about how he thought and thinks that the administration is going to drop, or the DEA, I should say, would drop their proposed rule ahead of a congressional recess, and Congress is out for the next 2 weeks after Friday. So, that's going around, but I think, whether that happens or not, obviously that's the near-term focus. But, you saw, I think it was last night it broke that there's bipartisan, bicameral support for SAFE. We'll see if that can get through. And of course, we're waiting for Garland. It's been a lesson in patience. I thought having children would teach me patience. Like this sector has taught me patience. But presumably that's still ahead of us. And don't forget, if we go another 10 days without any comment from the Florida Supreme Court, that'll be on the November ballot. So I think that'll be a nice, a new catalyst to look forward to.
Yeah, people are very excited about Florida, which I totally get. So as we kind of were talking about a little bit in the pre-show, and kind of as you mentioned, I feel like we've seen more conversation around whether that's safe or just some sort of DEA movement. A lot of calls from the Biden administration to actually do something and do it quickly. Um, I don't know. How much are you believing it currently? How much are you skeptical? What's your balance currently? Because I feel like it's hard with the lip service, but
Well, so there's a few things. I mean, I don't think you can really discount the State of the Union mention followed by a live stream from the White House in terms of signaling their intentions. But I think the real tell, at least for me, was the article that came out subsequent that talked about the conversations that happened after the cameras went off, where Kamala Harris was talking about this isn't enough. We need to decriminalize. We need to get everybody out of jail, et cetera, et cetera. So, that seems to be their 2.0 plank. And, if you're going to run on a 2.0 plank, you need to show some success in your 1.0 efforts, right? Otherwise, what are you doing?
yeah.
So because of that, I'm optimistic and conscious of the fact that optimism and politics are probably, not exactly, they're strange bedfellows in terms of vernacular. But we'll see what happens because it's going to happen, right? Something's going to happen. I'm actually really interested to see sort of the sequencing, whether, we see something from the DEA first or we get something from SAFE or, Garland, I think, comes out, in conjunction with the DEA to talk about how it all fits. I know there's some people that still think that Schedule 3 would still tax adult use. We don't think that's going to be the case, but it would be nice for the Attorney General to actually say that. As well as sort of other doodads that might be in there. And when I say other doodads, like we think this is going to be coal with a section for financial institutions or banks to work with these companies. So that's positive, or would be positive. Any of those three would be positive. But we need to see it because I think the market right now is sort of setting up for good news. And we've seen what happens when that doesn't happen. But this is not a congressional process. It's an administrative process. And everybody in that process reports up to Biden.
Yep, that makes sense. In the meantime, as we're kind of seeing things come closer and closer and closer, do you think we see more of what we saw with the Wall Street Journal article where we see more kind of opposition speaking up and kind of
I will tell you, we talked about this before we went on. But when I hang them up one day, I'm going to look back at last week as probably one of the reasons why. We've seen this week in and week out when people are, getting jiggy on social media over the weekend. Monday, very often disappoints, and when people are pretty, bummed out as they were Monday or last weekend and Monday, you saw how we ended the week. I do think that, the signals from the White House are meaningful, but they're not meaningful unless we see action on the other side. We have said coming into this year that we think there's going to be a steady drumbeat of good news between here and the election. I think that we're seeing that. I think other people are catching on to it, but I still think that most of the money, the big money, they have no interest in the space until they actually see movement. And that's been consistent. Like, we're not going to touch it until something changes. So
which I mean makes
it's hard
sense.
to see when that happens because you're going to have a process for custody and all that on the other side of this. And then you have the ETF that effectively is the plumbing for the entire industry.
Yep. No, I think that totally makes sense. And that's kind of the story that we've been talking about all this time, that no surprises, no big changes in terms of how this thing should roll out. It's just, again, dang timing, unfortunately. But yeah, okay, that makes sense. Also, yes, I agree. I wish I had this schedule. It feels like a European schedule with Congress. They're always off. They're always hanging out, always going on vacation. It's great. It's nice. That's what you need, I think, after all this stress.
Yeah, it's funny. It's not important, but
What?
I have a lot of people in my family have been on vacation over the last week. It must be nice. But this isn't the time. My vacation will be in a couple, 2 weeks, Benzinga, where I get to go and stuff bags and sweat through my shirt to make sure that everyone else is having a good time. But hopefully Benzinga will have a better tone this year. If anybody that's watching wants to go, there is a discount code. I think it's Weldon24. We're going to have Weldon there and some other things. So, or contact us. I'll give you the code. But I think it should be, I hope the tone will be better than it's been in the past, but we're going to need a kiss from the gods, or at least from the DEA or Merrick Garland or somebody, right? Like, it's interesting. You see the safe headlines coming, and people are like, "Yeah, I don't believe you,"
Which I get. I mean, again, we've talked about football. It's been 1,000 times, but maybe that's the persistence of it. Eventually.
It's so maddening when you think back the last few years when we were calling on Booker and telling him, you got this wrong. This is going to hurt, the social justice programs and people of color more. This is going to hurt the MSOs. You got it backwards. And this is right, and then he turned around and laid himself down.
Yeah, that's unfortunate.
What it cost us? It cost us 4% just as a base rate, so far, and 2 years. So,
yeah. So you mentioned Weldon. So we'll also be at Benzinga. Super excited to be there as well. I think, great to talk to a lot of the leaders of the different, companies and things like that, as well as hopefully see you and Weldon. How's he doing in general right now? I know he's still fighting the good fight, and what's sort of going on with him currently?
Well, I think he's got the flu right now, which isn't good. But, I don't want to speak out of turn. I know that there's constant communication on his part with DC. I know we're planning a trip that we were supposed to actually take tomorrow that got pushed by, we'll find out, but that could be good and hopefully something we can talk about in the coming month because it's exciting. But, I think you're going to see a lot of people on the far left decry Schedule 3, and you're going to see people on the far right decry Schedule 3. I personally think that it should be descheduled. I know that's anathema for a lot of people that we work with. I'm not talking professionally. I'm talking just, through the lens of like a moral, just a moral lens. Like, people shouldn't be in prison for this. I don't think anybody could argue that. They shouldn't be at the front of the line either, but they shouldn't be in prison. So, that should be what it is, but it's not. We don't have the political appetite. I think it's going to take a while, and I think Schedule 3 is a stepping stone to descheduling. And that's what I think they're going to run on for 2.0. They're going to say, we're going to finish the job. Great. Good luck with that. Seriously. But, you gotta get 1.0 done before you can move on to 2.0. And hopefully they realize that.
Yep. I think we talked about this last time with Elizabeth Warren's video, which I know you're a little sick of, which is totally fair, but she was talking about decriminalization, fully decriminalization, which I thought was an interesting versus rescheduling. But I think you're right that rescheduling at least starts to undo some harm, starts to make progress, and then hopefully we make our way fully. But again,
Yeah,
just
it took a while,
something.
they did not, this was not constructed to be unwound. You could see the way in the particulars and all of the, you know, I've learned more about this now. Like I've learned more about the elections. Like I've learned more about, these
I know.
arcane bill processes in the last 5 years than I ever thought I would
Treaties.
care about. But here we are.
Hmm.
But this should get done, right? And hopefully sooner rather than later. And then hopefully we see, everyone trying to get in through the outdoor, because there's only one way right now. Like we're not seeing much custody. I think it was, um, Sammy had said, what was it? Bojo stock, where it traded 0.3% of its average daily volume the other day. That wasn't related to the ETF. You see what I'm doing here, right,
Yeah.
Mackenzie?
I see you. I see you.
Okay, so I'm
You
good
got
at
me.
I'm good at following directions because I don't
You're
like getting
great.
yelled at. So
Oh, I would never yell at you.
no, you wouldn't, but others do.
Who knows?
So yeah, I think we'll move forward. I don't know when. I'm hoping it's sooner rather than later because all of the false starts and it just incrementally just degrades you. Like
Hmm.
you're like,
It
okay,
does.
but if you're not in front month paper and you just want to just be able to kind of sit back a little bit, I don't think it really matters. I really don't. I think it's a lot of noise between here and there. I pulled up a chart the other day. It was in the newsletter.
Mhm.
Just since August, they had a 90% gain and a 50% decline and a 40% gain and a 60%. You're like, what the fuck? Like, who lives like this? Like, this is not normal. But
No.
volatility is the opposite of liquidity, right? So as we get liquidity, and you start with some liquidity, right? There's no order books in these underlying names. So when these dealers come in to hedge the ETF, like they're shooting at paper tigers. There's nothing there. So, we need to fill in the liquidity in order for there to be a real market. I think I
More
said this to
normal.
you last time we were on. One of a good friend of mine is one of the biggest players in the space. We're talking about beats. He's like, beat what? He's like, there's no price discovery. There's these analysts are trying to pin the tail on a moving target, and it's just there's no market right now. Like this is private equity with a public reflection of private equity, and I think that's sort of right. I mean, you see a more normalized sort of price action in like the Canadian names because they're traded on real exchanges and they've got order books and they've got real investors. Like we'll get there, um, but that's the goal, right? And that's where the starting gate is, right? Like this has been 5 years to get to the starting gate. So.
Yeah, no, that's true. I think that is the overall encapsulating theme of normalization, whether that's how, names are trading, whether that's just sort of acceptance and not treating it like heroin, whether that's, paying regular taxes, not being in jail, like all those things, I think ultimately boil down to kind of that theme there, which is interesting. All right, I'm seeing some good questions come in. Also, hey Jane, also hey El Guapo. He's liking the glasses, which is good. Maybe speaking a little bit to how companies are navigating, seems like through earnings seemed pretty positive, which was good to see. I still think we're seeing that theme of kind of separation a little bit in terms of seeing which companies are really putting up. Um, any themes in terms of how they're navigating, if it's more that
Yeah.
aggressive, less
I mean,
aggressive?
other than the fact that earnings don't matter right now because this is a
Sure.
macro trade. No, I mean,
It's
it's sadly
true. I
true. It's
know.
a macro trade. I mean, tell me you're going to sell Green Thumb or Trulieve on those earnings, but it's not about that right now. This is a macro trade or a phase 3 clinical trial, right? This is biotech. I traded biotech in 1991, started when I started Morgan Stanley, biotech and banks.
Huh.
And like this is a binary outcome, right? And to the extent that we're not going to know until we know, like this is going to continue. The volatility, the reticence to get involved is going to continue. But earnings, given the fact that all of these companies have slashed capex, that they're paying 75% effective tax rates, that they can't take credit cards, all of this shit that we've been dealing with, despite that,
Yep.
um, I thought they were pretty solid. And, I guess got off the phone before where somebody was talking about, a friend of mine was comparing Green Thumb to Celsius. And the retort to him was like, Celsius is growing 40% a year. Green Thumb's not growing. I'm like, yeah, Green Thumb's not growing because all the money that they would be spending to grow, they're paying the government in taxes. Like, that's a
Mhm.
pretty fucking big asterisk, right? So I feel like earnings were pretty solid. And I think it's not surprising, prices firmed on the margin. I think overall, over time, prices will go lower, especially if we get Schedule 3 and everybody comes back online and everyone starts putting seeds in the ground again. Like prices will go lower, but that's nothing to fear. Like that's what somebody had said to me. That's my fear. I said that's not a fear. That's how you double or triple actually your total addressable market. Because in Canada, 72% I read today of sales were through the legal construct. I think we're about closer to 33, 34%. We're about one third. So the only way to compete with that is going to be on price, because you have bathtub gin, or you have, I don't even drink gin, but whatever the brand name gin is.
Yeah.
What are you going to do? You're gonna go with the safe brand product. So that's on the other side of this, but we got to get there first. But certainly, I think earnings. You're seeing two types of earnings. Two types of companies, right? You have the companies that are the haves that don't really need. I mean, obviously we all want it, but they don't really need federal reform to survive.
Mm-hmm.
And interestingly, because I think earnings were better across the board, I think what we've seen, and one of the reasons you saw the Veranos and the Green Thumbs and the TerraSens of the world come for sale, as they did, was people taking money off the top of the safety names, like those. Like I don't know what everybody else thinks, but like I know here at CB1, like we think those are three names that are going to win. No matter what, we know we were outsized. When things were really cloudy, we were outsized in those names because we felt safest, and I'm sure we weren't alone. So that way, when you see Air sort of to emerge out of this space, or you see some of these other, Cresco back in the game now, or whatever it is, there's only a handful of holders in this entire space. Like we know each other by name. It's like I see a print, I'm like, oh, there's Ricky, or there's Michael. And like that's not normal, right? Like you're not supposed to trade by appointment in a free market, right? So if there's only so many holders of the underlying names, it sort of makes sense that you're basically standing in a circle shooting at each other. So I think earnings were great, and I think the cost of that, some of the safer names may have taken a little bit of a bigger hit because money rotated into some of the more speculative names, right? That you're going to have more beta because they were left for dead. And by the way, like I know an ETF that has both sides of that on, so you don't really need to think about it all too much if that's how you want to position yourself.
Yep, that totally makes sense. Okay, well then, so in terms of talking about sort of the offensive, I think we've talked about what is it, back foot versus front foot, being kind of aggressive versus not. Would love to talk a little bit about Curaleaf and their acquisition recently. Is that a marker of really leaning in and taking that time to attack growth again? What's sort of the
I mean, I've always thought that Bojo has a competitive advantage in Europe, right? It's his backyard. I feel like he knows his way around there, maybe better than some of the other MSOs. And so I like the strategy. I mean, I like, one of the reasons that we, continue to invest in Village Farms is the same thing. They've got that optionality across Europe. Yeah, it's going to take some time to play out, but what they're doing in Canada and their low cost, MOTS in terms of production and working with these other governments in terms of implementation, like they're positioning to be, one of the long-term winners across the world, right? I think the fact that Curaleaf can aspire and actually take steps to play in that sandbox and do it aggressively, I think is a genuine competitive advantage, because there is going to be a very robust global market. One of our portfolio companies it's a private company, but they just got a license agreement in Japan for CBD beverages and other form factors like gummies. Like this is happening. So yes, like the ability to have open your stance and capture the European opportunity, I think is smart. I think them on the TSX is probably some of the reason why they outperformed on the up days. And I think we'll certainly see more benefits of the TSX, both for TerraSend and Curaleaf. You saw, what was it, 2 weeks ago, Verano was supposed to be out at the MSCI, would have created 4.3 million shares to buy. And I was like, I don't know, the meme with the popcorn, you just don't want to sit back and watch. I was like, this is going to be fun. And then, I think Beacon put out a note and said that they reached out and their counterparties they couldn't hedge because they couldn't buy the stock. So they asked to postpone it. And I think the next one's up on May 1st. But that's going to be good.
Yeah.
index buyers are going to be good in this liquidity profile. And then, of course, you have the thing that we talk about, and just don't be scared when you see it. You're going to see a lot of cap raises, right? And how onerous they are is a function of sort of where we are in this process. But you can't really, knock these companies and say they're dead men walking because capital markets are closed, and then turn around and knock them when they go out and tap capital markets. And what that looks like, obviously, is going to be a big differentiator, right? Like getting hypothetically an investment from a strategic, not looked at as dilution as much as a solution, right? So you're like, hey, like they just got, pick a name, and you remember what happened with Canopy and Constellation back when. But if you say you get something like that with a green thumb or something, that's going to be the type of money that, like, okay, that's good. I'm still trying to find out who bought that $10 million worth of $10 at the beginning of the year, because somebody did.
Yeah.
But that there's that. I think the bigger boys will get those types of looks first. But if you can't find a strategic, then you want to find a private placement and a direct lender, or somebody that's going to just invest in you directly. And there's more of those guys now starting to float around. I spoke to one yesterday who may come down to Benzinga. And his big nit is liquidity. He's like, I can't add in these names. Like, it's just, we need to know how we can sell. He's like, but if things change, if we get something between here and Benzinga, and these companies want to raise money, we'll
I'm
just write
ready.
them the check directly and just box out the rest of the market. And that's because, if you just do a traditional bought deal, you'll have every schnook and their sister trying to cover their shorts, and you're helping them as much as helping yourself. So, but some people don't have the optionality there. Everybody needs money, right? Everybody needs money. They need it to either survive, or they need it to either execute against growth plans.
Yep, that is very true. All right, well said. I'm seeing some great questions in here that I'll get to as well. Did want to jump on Jane's as well. Hey, Jane, shout out. Also, congrats. C21 starting their own growth story a little bit. Do you want to talk a little bit about the acquisition on that front?
Yeah, I couldn't be more proud of Sonny and what they've done. This is, I'm on the board, we're an advisor, but this was all them. And I can tell you, we've had a number of different conversations through the years, and I'm glad those didn't work out. I feel like, this is a company that paid off over 35 million in debt through free cash flow, and now they've just, nailed a super accretive acquisition. And I think that's the game plan. You play small ball. They own Northern Nevada. And I think ultimately, I think they're going to be a very popular girl at the dance. But, when you have confidence in how you dance, you're not as beholden to the opinions.
You're not taking any guy.
Yeah.
You're not dancing with anyone. You're being, if someone offers us to break dance with you, you're saying, no, I'm going to wait to do a different type of dance, maybe. Fair enough.
Yeah. And I mean, not everybody's in that position, right? I think that's the best piece of paper on the street, to be honest. And position, board, the whole thing. But there's not many, this is a good little company, and they're gonna make somebody very happy one day. But I don't think that there's any rush. And I think when you don't have a rush, that's when good things happen. So we'll see.
Yep. All right. Perfectly said. All right. Let's see. Also looking through the comments, some funny ones that are good. All right. Well, then wanted to cover some other current news company wise. I know.
I finally got the Kim joke, Guapo.
Oh.
Yes. I haven't had a drink in 3 weeks again. I'm back on the wagon after falling off it for what was it, December and January?
Yeah.
I guess February. But yeah, I drink Tempters now, which is another portfolio company. It's 5 calories. It's delicious. They deliver to your doorstep. Get 25% off. It's like it checks a lot of boxes.
Yeah.
And marijuana. What is this? Pennsylvania Joint Committee.
Oh no. Let's see.
Marijuana legalization as governor renews push for reform.
We've seen that. We've seen the continued call for something to come for in Pennsylvania, which
yeah,
they
but
also
this time they're strenuously objecting to. No, I'm just kidding.
Better adjective. Love it. Yeah, true. All right.
So
Fair enough.
I don't know. Yes. Sorry.
No, all good. There's a lot going on all the time. That's, I think, part of the stress of cannabis is there's always some new headline hitting, something coming up. But again, hopefully positive for Pennsylvania eventually. We'll see. All right. Oh, so I did want to cover Verano really quickly. I saw their news with their subscription model. Seems super interesting. Yeah, would love to hear your thoughts on it. Are you going to sign up? What's the
I meant to do it this morning. I got a little bit busy. I'm on an Alfred Nooner. Can I call you back?
Tell them to
Is
say
that
hi.
okay? Okay, thanks.
Love it.
Um, I am a big fan. I've actually been pitching that. I don't remember if I pitched it to them, but I pitched it to everyone. I'm like, you have a customer that is going to, there is that 1%, we'll call them. I don't know,
Mhm.
they're probably more than 1%, that wants to be pampered. They want, they're the people that walk into a dispensary and they sort by most expensive, right? They look for the
Mhm.
highest THC, right? And not my thing, right? Like I don't walk into a bar and say, give me your Everclear. Um, but there are people like that. And there are, people are passionate about the plan. And if you can give them a custom experience that makes them feel like they are closer to this experience, then you give them discounts, you make it worth their while, you give them special
Mhm.
drops. I think it's a home run. I was very happy to see that this morning.
Yep.
So,
I
you know,
agree. I think
I,
it's
cannot,
a
I told you this before. Like, I'm still in New York. I'm in Long Island. Like, there's a couple places that opened up nearby, but I've tried their weed and it was like, ugh. So like I go to Jersey and I like load up in Jersey. Like, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this out loud. I always keep it. I smoke it all in Jersey before I come home. Um,
government, please, if you're Siri, if you're listening.
but that's,
Fine.
like hopefully that's going to normalize because I know PharmaCann has great weed in the city in New York and Green Thumbs here. So
Mhm.
hopefully that'll. I just want to be able to just order it like a pizza.
Yeah, I think keep it yeah, most people are looking for just, again, that normalization, that same theme. Speaking
Little
of New York
pepperoni.
yeah, what yeah, yeah, I think, whatever. All right, New York, anything just touching on states, I guess, really quickly, anything getting better? Is that sort of solved by just time? I know they're making a lot more calls to get
No, they shit canned the OCM director.
Oh,
So
okay.
yeah, well, that's what Schultz told me. I didn't see that headline, but Schultz told me he's out. Ooh, sorry, Jeff,
Oh.
if that's not true. I mean, Bob Schultz.
Mhm.
Uh, but they're shaking up. It's a disaster. I remember when like New York versus New Jersey was an actual thing, and you're
I
like, I wonder
know.
who's going to win. And it's like, and as bad as New Jersey was, do you remember like they pushed like what was it
Yeah,
air,
they
and they put
delayed,
it was
yeah.
like and you're like, oh my god, this is the worst. You're like, it
Just
wasn't so
wait.
bad. Like compared to New York, you're like that wasn't so bad at all. Like
Yeah.
all things considered. But there's other good states, Missouri, Maryland.
Yeah.
The one thing I think about a lot is as you look at this growth, I think I put on Twitter or it's going to be on there later about the projections going forward. And, the mature states aren't really, they're sort of stagnant growth. So, the question becomes like, is that what New York looks like, down the road? And is that what other states look like down the road? And I've gone through this exercise. I think ultimately, by the time you get there, you're going to have some real generational winners in your hands if you pick the right ones. But over time, I think the industry will evolve, right? Like you'll see more. It'll be more about the brands. It'll be more about the experience, and I think what we're really excited for here at CB1 also is 3.0, right? Like we have a couple of privates in our book. One is a couple of biotechs. One of them is crushing right now, and we think potentially could be one of the biggest winners that we've ever seen. And that's people don't really even understand that there's a cannabis 3.0 cannabinoid bioscience, right? So that is exciting to us as well. It'll take a little bit more time, but you have things like transdermal patches for breast cancer, right? And to sterilization of gauze, at a rate that's just infinitesimally better than what they're using now. Like all of these different applications, that is exciting. But you just gotta know where to look.
Yep, no, I totally agree. Also loving the comments. No worries, Guap. You're welcome to comment as much as you
If you
want.
know what I mean.
That's all good. All right, well, it's actually might be a good time to get to that question. Wanted to get to Anthony's question, which, hey, Anthony, thanks for joining. Thanks for the great perspective. Does the Farm Bill loophole get closed? And if not, what do you think of the impact of the hemp-derived THC does to the industry? Great question.
Yeah, great question. We think it does get closed for the most part, but we feel like there will be a robust industry, robust industries that come out of it that are, spared, like low dose hemp beverages, right? Like 10 milligram or less hemp
Mhm.
beverages. Um, it's important to understand, and it took me a little bit of time to sort of think through this. but it's, and the data that was coming out over the end of last year and the beginning of this year was that light bulb. But these hemp derived cannabis drinks, they're not replacing cannabis. They're replacing alcohol. They're actually a funnel into cannabis for a deeper experience. It's a CPA. It's a cost per acquisition. You're introducing a new audience to cannabinoids. And I think it's a pretty powerful sort of shift in perspective, because when you look at sort of the growth trajectory of those hemp beverages and no 280E and no interstate restrictions and what they're doing to the alcohol business, right? Look at any of these alcohol companies and their sales. So the alcohol guys are making a real big push into these beverages as a replacement. And they have something to say about policy too. So I don't think you'll be able to order flour online and have it delay. You're not going to be able to order, a lot of the stuff, and you're seeing the states kind of crack down on it, you know. But I do think that there's going to be, an industry that emerges, and I don't think that's a threat to cannabis. I think it's an opportunity to cannabis. We're actually talking to some teams about creating farm systems, hemp farm systems, that really becomes an R&D incubation lab for these other form factors and these other experiences, that is additive and potentially a marketing tool for, to get people into your store. So
Yep.
I think it'll survive parts of it, and parts of it will go away as they should.
Yep, totally agree. And I think with the alcohol component as well, I think we've seen people be more concerned about their health in general. I was actually just walking through a grocery store and checking all of the like little displays that they have. The majority of them, they look like alcohol, but they were all seltzer waters, sort of like that Death Wish, or they were low or no alcohol kind of components. But I think I could easily see that being replaced with the THC version, where you get a little bit of something, but it's not really, you're right, interacting with people who are flower first, kind of true users, which is great. And of
Yeah.
course, great question. All right, perfect. All right, well then I feel like that is really what I wanted to hit, because I guess we covered Florida briefly, PA briefly, New York. Yeah, I guess. Okay, what final question? I guess
Pennsylvania.
is what
Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania, which again we'll see, but hopefully soon. We're working on some
Well,
merch for
Kim,
that.
that was like the buried lead of her call. Everyone was talking about taxes, but Kim said that they're going to pass it this summer. It's going to be implemented on, January 1st. And nobody talked about that. I was like, and I went back and I read it, and I'm like, no, she said that. So the stock trades that way too. So that would be good. And again, if you get Ohio, Florida, and Pennsylvania in an election year, probably bodes well,
Yeah,
right? Now you probably understand, what they're looking at in the White House when they're like, let's talk about cannabis.
it's the time. I think so. Sorry, I'm trying to read through comments. Yes, they're all very good. Ba, ba, ba. Agree. Yep. All right. Fair enough. Okay. Well, then heading in as we're getting through the year, what's your mantra that's keeping you on mentally good, mentally sane? What's sort of keeping you, if you are sane?
I'll tell you, I feel so much better since stopping drinking alcohol again.
Yeah.
I feel better. I feel clearer.
Mhm.
I work out every day. I try to sneak off the desk for an hour to get a little pelly in,
Nice.
because I feel like healthy mind, healthy body.
Very
This is
good.
a taxing business. I mentioned how tough last week was, and it's tough for a day, it's tough for a week, but when you start talking about doing this for 3 years, you
It's,
know,
yeah.
you start to realize like this has really been something, right? And
Yeah.
like when I stop writing for the Substack and for Twitter and I go dark, you'll know that I'm writing the book uh,
Ooh.
that talks about how the MSOs all competed for U.S. dominance.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, that'll be fun, and we'll have I don't know, maybe Jennifer Garner play you.
Sounds great. We can do a live nooner version. All right. Love it. Okay. All right. Super hyped for that. All right. That's good also to hear, Zachary. You're also off the drink train, which is good to hear. And then final question from El Guapo, which I saw he said it earlier, so I want to make sure we don't lose it. His theory: barbarians have been behind the gate for a while, still waiting for the cavalry. Do you agree?
I don't know, man.
That's true.
I see 20% short interest. I don't know how much of that is dealer oriented, and I still don't know how many naked shorts are in the CSE names, but I would love to find out. You see the agendas, especially on the slow days. They don't even try to hide it anymore, because when you get caught like Citadel, you get a $7 million fine, which they probably paid by the time lunch got around.
Yeah, that's true.
So there's really not much, you can do, except be aware of it. I think, Jeff Schultz, points out the algos that are operating, and you see them just hitting these names down. So, I think you can make the argument that the stocks and the business are not the same thing. But it's going to take some time for them to sort of align, because there, there needs to be structural integrity to the space.
Yep, perfect. Well said. Also, yes, Jane, I would imagine you would get a shout out for all the work and all the time and everything that you put in, which is great.
Linda Carter will play her.
Oh, that would be
Linda
amazing.
Carter's still
The
alive.
original Wonder Woman. Yeah, that is true. She's Wonder Woman. All right, cool. All right. Well, Todd, thanks so much for taking the time, walking us through, just kind of giving us a temperature check. Super, super appreciate it. Everybody, thanks for being on as well. Definitely recommend, like, follow if you want to keep up to date with what we're doing. Definitely check out also the Substack, and of course, follow Todd on X and or Twitter, whatever you're calling it. And yeah, I think that's it. But thanks everyone so much. Really appreciate it. And thanks, Todd. We'll catch you later.
Yep, thank you.
Yep.
Before investing, carefully consider the investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses found in the prospectus, available at advisorshares.com.